A name that most men over 50 probably haven't heard before has been quietly making waves in a corner of entertainment that doesn't often get covered in mainstream news. Connor Storrie is a young Canadian-American actor who recently landed on the radar of a much wider audience, and the story of how he got there is more layered than a celebrity profile might suggest. But before diving into the bigger picture, there's a small detail from a recent magazine shoot that managed to go viral for entirely the wrong reasons. So what exactly happened with the Lobster? Storrie appeared on the cover of Cultured magazine in a shoot that featured, among other visual elements, a bright red lobster on a beach. The image caught attention, and not just for the artistry involved. Viewers and fans noticed something immediately that Storrie himself admitted he had missed in the moment. Lobsters are only bright red when they've been cooked. A live lobster is typically dark greenish-brown, so the prop, which was not a real animal at all, accidentally looked like a cooked crustacean just sitting there on the sand. Storrie addressed it directly and with good humor, noting that no animals were harmed and acknowledging the unintentional irony. It was, by his own description, meant to be tongue-in-cheek, and in a roundabout way, it landed that way regardless. That kind of self-awareness is worth noting because it tells you something about how Storrie operates publicly. He doesn't over-explain or get defensive. He acknowledges the moment, finds what's funny about it, and moves on. For a young actor navigating the early stages of serious celebrity, that's a trait that tends to serve people well. But how did a relatively unknown Canadian production lead to this level of public attention in the first place? The answer begins in Toronto, where a television series called Heated Rivalry was filmed on what was, by industry standards, a modest budget. The show is based on a novel by Rachel Reed, part of her Game Changers series. It is a gay hockey romance, and that description alone is enough to tell you it was never going to be a quiet, under-the-radar release. The series was adapted by Jacob Tierney, a writer and director known for the cult Canadian comedies Letterkenny and Shoresy. Tierney brought Storrie on board to play Ilya Rozanov, a Russian hockey star whose secret relationship with an American rival named Shane Hollander forms the emotional core of the story. The role required Storrie, who was American, to speak Russian convincingly and maintain a demanding accent throughout. He spent weeks in intensive language study before filming began. Storrie's co-star Hudson Williams plays Shane Hollander, and the two actors developed a rapport that those involved in the production recognized early as something special. Tierney has said that their chemistry was evident even in a remote video audition, which is no small thing. Chemistry is one of the most difficult elements to manufacture in any production. You either have it or you don't, and the people making the casting decisions clearly felt they had found it. But what was it like for the two actors themselves in those first hours and days of actually making the show? Both Storrie and Williams have spoken about the unusual experience of their first day of filming. By at least one account, that first day included not only a press conference scene from the pilot episode, but also one of the show's more intimate sequences. Working with an intimacy coordinator, the two actors had walked through the choreography and emotional intent of the show's physical scenes before cameras rolled, a standard practice in modern production that helps actors feel prepared and safe. By their own description, the professionalism of the crew and the moodiness of the cinematography quickly dissolved whatever nerves remained. Williams has noted that he had worried the show might look like a brightly lit sitcom given Tierney's comedic background, and that seeing the first footage from the monitor eliminated that concern immediately. The show premiered on Crave, a Canadian streaming platform that is not widely known outside of Canada, and yet the fan response, even before a wider release, was extraordinary. Readers of Reed's novels had been following the production closely from the moment the casting was announced. The combination of beloved source material, a passionate existing readership, and what turned out to be genuinely strong performances created momentum that moved well beyond the typical promotional cycle. So what happened once the show actually reached a broader audience? The word phenomenon gets used loosely in entertainment coverage, but in this case, the numbers and the cultural footprint suggest it is not an overstatement. Within months of the show's premiere, Storrie and Williams had carried the Olympic torch in Italy, made late-night talk show appearances, and presented at the Golden Globes. People whose careers they had admired from a distance were now seeking them out at industry events. They had gone from relative unknowns working on a small Canadian production to two of the more talked-about young actors in the business. The speed of that transition is striking, even by the standards of an industry where overnight recognition is more common than it used to be. Part of what drove that recognition was the specificity of what Storrie brought to the role of Ilya Rozanov. The character is Russian, guarded, outwardly confident, and carrying emotional weight that slowly becomes visible over the course of the season. Storrie has described Ilya as someone for whom power is the central motivation, not hockey itself. He sees Ilya's athletic success as a means to an end, a way of establishing control and status in a world where his upbringing left him feeling powerless. That reading of the character gives the performance a consistency and an interior logic that audiences responded to, even when the character is at his most difficult to like. It is the kind of interpretive work that separates a performance from a portrayal. Williams, for his part, brought a different set of qualities to Shane Hollander. Shane is disciplined, earnest, emotionally transparent in ways that Ilya is not, and carrying his own internal conflict in the form of identity questions he is not fully confronted. Williams has described Shane's struggle as a collision between the idea of perfection he has built his life around and feelings that don't fit inside that structure. The two characters, by design, represent opposing approaches to the same level of professional achievement, and their dynamic creates the kind of dramatic friction that sustains a season-long story. The show also deals frankly with physical intimacy in ways that generated discussion beyond the fanbase. Both actors have addressed the topic thoughtfully, pushing back against the idea that sex scenes in a narrative context are simply there for shock value or audience appeal. Their argument is that in this particular production, the intimate scenes are doing story work. They change the emotional positions of the characters. They reveal things that the characters cannot say in dialogue. Whether or not a viewer agrees with that framing, it reflects a level of intentionality about the material that is evident in how the actors discuss their craft. Storrie has also spoken publicly about his passion for languages and music in ways that add texture to his public profile beyond the role that made him famous. He discovered a Russian pop duo called Ice Peak in 2017 while living in France, became invested enough to teach himself Russian and the Cyrillic alphabet, and eventually received a message from one of the group's members acknowledging his fandom. He has also talked about discovering an electronic artist named Converter on SoundCloud, an act he thought had disbanded or perhaps died based on memorial comments left by fans, only to find that the act had quietly released a new album roughly 25 years after going quiet. These are not the details of someone playing a character. They are the details of someone genuinely curious about the world, which tends to come through in the work. The matching tattoos that Storrie and Williams got during the production, two words that summarize a tongue-in-cheek observation about the entertainment industry, have also become a talking point. Storrie's explanation of the choice is more thoughtful than the phrase implies. His point is that what looks provocative on the surface can carry something more meaningful underneath, and that the connection he formed with Williams through this project is what the tattoo actually commemorates. It is the kind of meta-commentary that plays well in interviews and also happens to be sincere, which is a combination not every young actor manages to pull off. What comes next for Storrie and Williams depends significantly on whether Heated Rivalry moves into a second season. The source material exists, the creator has optioned additional books in the series, the audience is clearly there and vocal about wanting more. Storrie has said he would embrace adapting the full second book without reservation. Williams has expressed specific enthusiasm for particular scenes he hasn't seen staged yet. The machinery for continuation is in place, and the appetite for it is real. Whether the business side of things aligns to make it happen is the outstanding question, and that question only time will answer. For now, Connor's story sits at one of those hinge moments that come along rarely in any career. A period when the work has landed, the audience has responded, and the next move carries genuine weight. How he handles it, what projects he chooses, and whether the thoughtfulness he displays in conversation translates into a sustained body of work are all open questions. Based on what he has shown so far, there are reasonable grounds for expecting the answer to be interesting.